Welcome back to another edition of the Draft Dynasty Podcast. This is the first show after the conclusion of the NFL draft, and boy, howdy was it worth the wait. Andrew, we had a good time on the live stream through Steel Curtain Network and Fans First Sports, and just diving into all 3 days, every pick. We had analysis for every single pick through the end of the draft from day one, round one, to day three, round seven. It was a blast. We hit everything. Mr. Irrelevant, the number one overall pick, and everything in between. And Andrew, I don't know if it's a bittersweet moment for you like it is for me, the draft coming and going. Got a whole nother year until we get back to it, but very satisfying to actually get the selections done. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, and it's nice to be done. It's always bittersweet a little bit because, it's done. But we've got, obviously, a full draft in just a year from now that's going to be a better class overall, and we've got a lot to break down from this class, a lot of surprises, none of which were more than the one everyone's talking about in Shedeur Sanders, but I'm sure we're going to get into some others as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we should do, because we're going to try to kind of hit a little bit of everything on this show, just to generally wrap up the draft. And then we'll dive into some more specific topics over the next few weeks. I think, one of the things I definitely want to hit is dynasty leagues and what this looks like after the draft. So hitting up some of that, getting on to the fantasy side of things at some point here. But we want to make sure we give the draft and the selection process its due diligence. So before we dive into anything, Andrew, first, because it's not getting talked about a lot, this draft was unique because there was one clear-cut quarterback at the top that was basically guaranteed to be the first overall pick from the moment we realized what this draft class was. The Tennessee Titans do end up taking Cam Ward, and I think it's worth mentioning that selection and what that could be for the Tennessee Titans. Before we even get into our topic, which is going to be like drafts that we like and loathe, there's going to be drafts or like individual players to team matches that we really like. And then we're going to just kind of hit up some rapid fire thoughts at the end that we want to take a look into some of these other classes. So, but before we get into that, Cam Ward to the Titans, first overall pick. It was clear cut for a while now. How does that impact the Titans? Is this a guy that you believe in as a future franchise quarterback for Tennessee? And did they make the right choice by sticking and picking and trying to go get the quarterback?
I do. I see a lot of Jordan Love in his game. You think of the Tennessee Titans and just what they've gone through at the quarterback position in recent years, really ever since Ryan Tannehill, when he was kind of at the peak of his career. They haven't had anything to speak of. Derrick Henry's gone. Their identity was gone at that point. They're trying to discover who they are, their new look franchise. And there's no better place to start when you have a decent offensive line. It's not great, but they have a solid line. And I think it's a spot where Cam Ward, he's not going to get destroyed year one, but it's definitely going to be a learning curve for him. Coming in, there's going to be some growing pains. He doesn't have a great offense, but they drafted a couple later round receivers that I think will be a nice burst of explosiveness down the field. We know that Cam Ward likes to throw the deep ball, and he's very effective doing so. So I'm excited to see what he does. I like Cam Ward. I've liked him for several years, and this year he finally put it all together, and we saw what he was capable of doing. He's got a great arm. He's got all the traits. So I'm looking really forward to seeing what this guy's going to do. Maybe fantasy, you don't buy in completely in year one, but for dynasty leagues, man, I'm telling you what, if they can come away with a premier receiver in next year's draft, this is a team to watch out for on offense in years to come.
It is. And I think the biggest question mark I have after the pick is, how does this coaching staff make the most of it? It's not even the player to me that I have the most questions about, because yeah, there's some inconsistencies to his game, but as far as being a top 10 worthy pick at quarterback, he was definitely that. And when you add in the rest of this class together, he was most definitely worthy of the first overall pick for probably the most QB needy team in the league. Tennessee makes the right choice staying there. I agree with that. And I think you're right. I think I see physically a lot of Jordan Love in Cam Ward's game, but mentally, I think that's even where he takes another step on some of these guys as well. He's just unflappable, and he is very centered as a person, it seems like, especially when he's on the field. He goes about his business, not a lot of flair, not a lot of highs, not a lot of lows. Just kind of goes about his business and remains unflappable. He reminds me in a the best sense of the word as a Steeler fan of Joe Flacco, just how calm and cool he was. Joe Cool. That's what they called him. And that's exactly what it was. He reminds me of that from a demeanor perspective. And I think that that's going to play well with the athletic skill set that he has for the Titans. So congratulations, Tennessee, on your first overall pick. I think it was the right one. I think you're going to appreciate his services for years to come, even if it's not under this current coaching staff. But with that out of the way, and I think we did need to talk about that, let's dive in, Andrew, to some of our favorite draft classes from this go around. So I'm going to throw it to you. You go ahead and give me your favorite class. And that could be draft strategy, players picked, a combination of the two, whatever direction you want to take this. What was your favorite class, favorite haul from this draft?
Yeah, I don't want to choose any too low-hanging fruit, but I do think that the New York Giants had a really solid draft. I understand they end up moving back up into the first round, and that's the exciting thing. But usually I'm not a fan of teams that trade back up in. But I think they made the most of the picks of what they had. Now, I did have a higher grade on Jalen Milroe than I did on Jackson Dart, just barely. The reason being because of the upside, and I think that he's got the heart, the know-how. I think he's going to put it all together at some point in time. But for the Giants situation, you've got to get a guy who can come in a little bit sooner and provide you a spark. If you're Brian Dable, if you're Joe Shane, you've got to do that if you want to save your job. And I think Jackson Dart can do that. I'm not going to say he's going to start day one. I think Russell Wilson will be the day one starter there. But if he begins to struggle, I think they've got a guy who can come along. I think he's going to be one of those guys that succeeds earlier than what people expect him to on a low level. I'm not saying this guy's going to be Joe Burrow or anything like that, but he gives you those confident vibes that Joe Burrow always gave. When he first came to the league, he seemed just unfazed. He can just come in, he can handle the pressure. Jackson Dart can come in and handle the pressure of the New York media. This was a great landing spot for him. And I think Brian Dable is smart enough of a quarterback whisperer to know how to ease him along and make that transition smooth from his very air raid offense to the NFL style. And I think it was a great landing spot for him. Abdul Carter, you can never have too many pass rushers. I think they've got a great rotation of pass rushers now. And then even once you go down later in the draft, Darius Alexander was a steal in the third round. He's great defensive line depth. You put him in their 3-4 system next to Dexter Lawrence, that is a great tandem right there. And then even in round 4, you got Scadaboo. He's a great compliment to Tyrone Tracy. Tracy was good last year. He's that speed element out of the backfield. He can catch passes. And now you've got a guy in between the tackles who can really hit it home on those short yardage situations. They needed that. And even going to Marcus Bowe and Thomas Fidone, I think both of those guys have a chance to be starters at their position. Bowe was a blocker at one point in time for Tyrone Tracy on that Purdue offensive line. So the draft just made sense as a whole. There was no pick I absolutely hated. I think that this was a very strong draft for the New York Giants.
Yeah, and even if you throw out the Dart pick, right, where you're taking a chance on a quarterback, right, and you had to, and there's no pressure on him. There's no pressure on him at all this season. You got Russ. You've got Jameis there. You've got a group of guys ahead of him that you don't have to worry about.
And he's not even the first pick that they had. It would have been different if they chose him number 3 overall.
Yes.
But when he's introduced at the podium right after the draft, Abdul Carter's the first one to speak to the media, not Jackson Dart. That's huge for a young quarterback because he's not the guy that has to be, the top expectation of this class is Abdul Carter, not Jackson Dart. Dart's going to get talked about more because he's the quarterback. But it was a smart move by them not to be too hasty. I hate it when the national media talks about, well, if you love the guy enough to take him at 24, you should just take him at 3. No, because if it's not good value at 3, you don't do that and put your quarterback in a situation for failure. You wait until the value is right and you take him. And if you pass up on him, fine, because there's no guarantee he's going to succeed the same way he would at 24 if he did at 3. This is a great situation for Dart.
Yeah. You don't pass up the dominant potential gold jacket guy at 3 for the quarterback just because you're going to take him later. You do that later if it's going to work. And then if it doesn't, you've got other options with upside as well that they could have pursued. So good process there from the Giants. My favorite thing about the Giants draft, Andrew, is that they took the strength of their roster and they made it even stronger That defensive front is going to be ridiculous in 2025 and beyond. They can rotate 7, 8, 9 guys deep on that defensive front if you include the edge rushers. And I mean, Darius Alexander with that lineup that they've already got, Dexter Lawrence and company, and then Abdul Carter screaming off the edge with these other guys, and his flexibility too. Fantastic stuff. Marcus Bowe was incredible value. Thomas Fidone was incredible value. It was a great mix of need and value, and building your strength at a really important spot along the defensive front. So, yes, absolutely A+ grade there for me on this draft as well. My favorite draft, Andrew, was the New England Patriots. I think for what you have at quarterback in Drake May, who, I mean, year 2, right? Or year 1, it was the Jaden Daniels show. Drake May and Caleb Williams kind of vied for the headlines throughout the season, but Jaden Daniels stole the show. I think this year, all 3 of those guys are going to be the talk of the NFL as like the next wave. It's the next 2004 draft. It's the next trio of quarterbacks that's going to take the league by storm. I have high hopes for Caleb Williams and the Bears. I have really high hopes for Drake May and the Patriots. What they did was this offseason, if you include the draft and then their coaching changes, the offseason that they had for bringing in just good players, going from bad to good or bad to average is really good for a team like this. And they did that at a lot of spots, but then you add Will Campbell to protect Drake May. And whether or not you think he's going to play tackle in the long run, he's a good offensive lineman, a really good offensive lineman. And if it doesn't work out at tackle this year, or you're like, he's fine there, but we could move him inside. He'll be better. Let's go get a tackle next year. Nobody's going to fault you for that. You've got another good player on your offensive line. Travion Henderson's going to come in and be kind of an easy button for Drake May sometimes, right? Where you just need a big play. You can catch out of the backfield. You need something to pop, something other than May making a play. Travion Henderson can do that. Kyle Williams gets open. That's all he does. They had nobody who could do that last year, Andrew. Drake May was throwing up prayers to everybody and their brother and their cousin who probably shouldn't have been on a roster. And then you add another lineman, Jared Wilson out of Georgia in the 3rd round. All these picks are day 1 and day 2 picks. They had a lot of stuff to work with. Then you add Joshua Farmer, Braden Swinson, Craig Woodson. It's just a really good class, Andrew. Their trajectory jumps way up after a class like this, in my opinion. And I would not be surprised if this team, in fact, I'm going to probably pick it this year as kind of my surprise. I've been saying it so far. This is my sleeper team to go to the playoffs in the AFC. I think they're the 2nd best team in their division already.
It's an interesting argument. I think a lot's going to have to do with the Jets quarterback situation. I still believe in Justin Fields, but when you're talking about guys who've proven more within 1 year, I would say Drake May proved more last year than Justin Fields did with the Steelers, although I don't feel Justin was given the best hand of cards. But they definitely improved their team in key areas. You've got to be able to help these young quarterbacks. We've seen that as the trend in recent years. That's how you do it. And I mean, Mike Vrabel that may not have all the pieces he needs on defense to generate an elite defense, but his intel and know-how, I think, is enough to help him be formidable this year. They already have a lot of talent in the secondary. It just needs to be further developed. They've got Christian Gonzalez. They've got some other guys back there. So I think that they'll be formidable enough on the defensive side of the ball. And the biggest thing you've got to do is help develop Drake May. And that's priority number 1 if you want to get to being the Super Bowl contender. So I'm hopeful that some of these picks, not because of them, but I'm hopeful for the sake of the team that they don't work out with my anti-New England bias. But I will say that they definitely addressed the positions that they needed to address.
Absolutely. And before we get to your next one, just an aside, okay? We're Steeler fans. A lot of Steelers fans complaining that the Steelers passed up a quarterback in this draft until round 6. They didn't go after Sanders, even though he was falling and presented good value. They didn't go get Jalen Milroe in the 3rd round. Honestly, Andrew, there is a world, you mentioned Justin Fields, there's a world where the Steelers' biggest regret at quarterback was letting Fields go and not bringing him back. And I think that's probably more credible of an explanation of failure on this part of the Pittsburgh Steelers than any of the quarterbacks in this draft class. Because if Fields goes to New York and lights it up, you had that guy in the building. You had him in the building. You could have had him for $20 million a year for the next 2 years. That's pennies for quarterback play, especially competent quarterback play and with the potential to be elite. So just as an aside for Steelers fans out there, still, that could be the biggest mistake you've made this offseason.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. Because if Justin Fields doesn't even play better, if Justin Fields just played how he did last year, winning football, winning games enough to, win games with good defense, whatever the case may be, that alone is worth more than $20 million in the modern NFL. I mean, it is. It's the quarterback position. That alone is a bargain. And I don't see a world in which Justin Fields does worse this year with DK Metcalf and George Pickens. There's no way. Yeah. Unless they're just afraid Fields isn't going to throw the ball enough to keep both Pickens and Metcalf healthy so that they want a guy who can be a higher volume thrower. I don't understand that. Justin Fields was the best option the Steelers had at quarterback this year. I think they're going to regret letting him go. They should have guaranteed him a starter spot. Should have said, okay, Justin, you behaved. You've done everything we've asked you to do. Just come on in. We're going to give you the chance to be the guy for this year. And yeah, that huge mistake on the Steelers' part there. I don't know what the holdup was, what the issue was, but that's the only thing I look back with serious regret this offseason for the Steelers.
Yeah, you let him slip through your fingers. And there's a world where that really comes back to bite you if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that was a tangent. Let's get to your other team here, Andrew, before we go to break. Your other favorite draft from this class so far.
I really like the Cleveland Browns draft. And I know these are the teams like the Giants and the Browns. Those are the teams we talk about every offseason, right? Oh, yeah, they won the offseason. But I like their move down. I understand that they missed out on Travis Hunter, who I believe was the best player in this draft. I do think that they got really good value for trading back, though, and that value is going to be big for next year if they need to draft a quarterback. But they still had a couple lottery tickets they threw out this year, and I don't think there's a problem with that. When you had the picks that they had, when you're in the situation they had, I think you throw some darts at the wall, see what sticks. Mason Graham was a solid pick in round 5, and with the 5th pick overall. He's going to come in from day one and be an immediate upgrade from anything they had on the interior. With him on the interior and Garrett on the outside, you can't just allocate a double team to one side of the line the entire time. Sometimes you're going to have to focus more attention in the middle now, too. And I think he was a great fit for what Cleveland wants to do in their 4-3 front. Schlesinger, they were getting a little thin at linebacker, and Schlesinger can do a little bit of everything. He's a leader. He's a tackler. And if you see what the whole AFC North did this draft, was run defense, because you know what? The Baltimore Ravens were pretty tough to stop last year. The Steelers went in and got Derek Harmon, Wyatt Black, Jack Sawyer, all three of which are solid run defenders. And then you have the Cleveland Browns who come in, they get the running back, but they get Mason Graham, interior defensive lineman, and they get Carson Schlesinger to plug up the middle at linebacker. Even the Bengals, Shamar Stewart, who's a pretty solid run defender, already has a lot of upside as a pass rusher. They prioritize stopping the run. And that's what you've got to do when you're chasing the Baltimore Ravens. So it was a very wise philosophical draft from the Browns. And they hit on some of these later ones too. I mean, Judkins wasn't my top running back, but he's a scheme fit for them. Power back in a power system. Fannin Jr. is going to be utilized great in Stefanski's offense. You can move him all over the place. He's going to be a great little weapon for them. And then I wouldn't have taken Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round, whatever. But you got him and Shador. Good competition. Let's see who wins it out. And maybe one of them has enough potential to be a starter down the line. And even Dylan Sampson. I mean, I had Dylan Sampson rated almost up there with Quinshon Judkins. You get 2 really good running backs to pair with Jerome Ford, who's already a solid back too. The Browns really bolstered the depth on the offense this year, and they're in good position with the draft capital they gained from trading back to move up and get their quarterback next year, which is the only thing that they're lacking from being a really, really good football team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a funny draft because to me, it was good process for most of it. But there's still such a level of dysfunction with this team that you're just like, you had to have this kind of draft to correct some of the dysfunction that you've had as an organization over the course of your history, especially recent history at the quarterback spot. It's been worse than ever. So they're in a different spot than some other teams. A lot of like, again, going back to the Steelers, a lot of Steelers fans are like, well, the Steelers should have thrown more darts at the quarterback position like Cleveland did this year. Cleveland's more desperate than Pittsburgh is because of the type of organization that they are and the issues that they've had. So you just can't compare the two teams and how they operate. It's apples to oranges, and it doesn't make sense to do anything other than separate those two entities for what they are.
With the Browns, I think Ryan Clark hit it best when he was talking about the Steelers. In using Ryan Clark's words, they should want to suck. Because if you're the Steelers, you've been in that mediocrity level that I think the Browns would love to be at, consistency into the playoffs, and then let's see what we can do from there. The Steelers have been there for a long time, and it has not worked out. And because they keep being good enough, they're never in position to get the quarterback. If you're just bad this year, you can get your quarterback next year, whether that's Aller, whether that's South Carolina's guy, whether that's Iamalieva or whoever they want to go after next year. You're in position to get your guy. So I get tired of even the Steelers fans that are like, oh, we got to get Rodgers to sign, or you got to do whatever. If Mason Rudolph's the starting quarterback in 2025, I don't give a rip. I'm fine with that. If the Steelers have their first losing season under Mike Tomlin, I will probably be the happiest I've been with Mike Tomlin in the last 5 years. I'm just being that serious.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And it plays to the whole chat and conversation about how you build teams. And some teams like Pittsburgh, they like to build as they win. And other teams like the Browns, they have had to, and not necessarily because of choice at times, they've had to hit the bottom before they can come back up. And there's a level of respectableness to the Browns that there hadn't been, like in the Ben Roethlisberger years, where the Steelers just ran roughshod over them every single time they played. It's a split matchup the last 5 years between them. So let's not get too high on our horses, Steelers fans, right, and say that they can't compete. But again, going back to their draft class, they hit needs, they hit value. They made good plays where they needed to, and I like the draft overall. Another one of my favorite drafts, just real quick, the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, the value in the second round, landing Will Johnson, makes this class epic enough as it is. But then you added that they addressed the front with Walter Nolan, that they hop back in and get an edge rusher in Jordan Birch later on from Oregon in the third round. Cody Simon, who very, very good as a blitzer, very strong in run support. Playing forward, he's really good. He's got great grades when it comes to like PFF and things like that. Playing forward, they needed somebody like that. Denzel Burke is an intriguing pick in the fifth round for his upside. That was a guy, Andrew, we had talked about in previous conversations about his class, whatever it would be. Could this be the number one corner coming out in his class? And it just never really worked out. But you land him in the fifth, you have some high upside there, and see what happens. I think that was a good pick. Hayden Cooper from Texas, good value in the sixth. Keaton Crawford out of Nevada, he's got some upside as well. So I just like this overall selection process for the Cardinals, and I think that they have a chance to be sneaky fun and competitive in the NFC.
I agree with them. I thought about them as one of my teams as well. And you think about scheme fits. What better scheme fits for Jonathan Gannon than Walter Nolan, who reminds you of one of those Eagles 4-3 defensive tackles? And then you go in. I know that their scheme is a little bit different than what Phillies is, how they run it, and just in terms of the base defense. But Will Johnson as well, a guy who can play either man or zone. Don't let the media fool you and say he's a zone-only corner. This guy can play man coverage too, and he's pretty nasty when he gets in your face too. He's not afraid to get physical. This was the steal of the draft. There were a bunch of teams that missed out. I think that the Cardinals did have a great draft and exactly what they needed to keep Jonathan Gannon's job, I believe. They're going to be a lot better on defense, a lot more physical, and teams should be a little wary in that NFC West, with Seattle with a new quarterback. We don't know what to expect there. The Rams with Stafford getting older. This division is winnable. I think the Arizona Cardinals are right up there with any other team. If they can stay healthy, if Kyler Murray can stay healthy, I think this team could be a lot better than people think.
All right, real quick before we go to break, Andrew, just rapid fire me one or two teams whose drafts you weren't a fan of.
I did not like the Minnesota Vikings draft. And in all fairness, they did not have that many picks. But with the picks they had, I didn't really like the selections they made. You look at Donovan Jackson is a good player, solid player. I had an early second round grade on him. But when you look at the needs they had on defense and the players that they passed on Malachi Starks. They passed on Will Johnson. They passed on Max Harrison. All three of those guys would have been great for their secondary that desperately needs help. And you look at their draft, they didn't address the secondary at all. And that's concerning to me. They have desperate needs in that secondary. They're very bare there. Ty Felton around's a nice complementary player. I don't know what he adds to the offense that they don't already have with the receivers in that room. Ingram Dawkins, developmental edge rusher, good scheme fit. But none of these picks really move the needle for me. I don't see what made them really better. I mean, the offensive line's a little bit stronger. There's nothing wrong with that. I just didn't like the philosophy they went into it. I felt they needed to address the defense better, even though they had a young quarterback. I felt the offense was already good enough. They didn't need to add more to it. They needed to fix on defense, and they had good players there that they passed on. And then the Green Bay Packers, to me, I think had the worst draft of anyone. Matthew Golden is a solid signing. I like him. I think he'll be used well in Green Bay. But beyond that, I don't like these picks. Anthony Belton in the second round is a reach. He's a bigger guy. They just drafted Jordan Morgan last year. They already had Zach Tom who can play tackle. They've got other guys there. I didn't think that they needed to push offensive tackle here this early. That's just my own personal opinion. Some people would disagree with that. ESPN had it as their second biggest need. I disagree. But Savion Williams from TCU, he's more of a Cordell Patterson type guy. He's not a natural receiver. Yeah. And it's not like Green Bay had to add extra depth there. They needed a guy like Golden. Okay, that's fine. But they don't need a bunch of depth. You have Dontavian Wicks. You have Jaden Reed, who I believe that needs to get more involved in the offense. I don't know why he didn't second half of last year. What happened there? Bo Melton, they've got some other guys that they've incorporated there. I didn't feel like they need to add two receivers, especially with the tight ends they already have, the two tight ends they have. It didn't make sense to me. They in the second round, they passed on several good defenders. In the first round, I think they could have gone edge rusher. Second round, if they would have gone the first two rounds with Will Johnson and Mike Green, this draft is entirely different. And then the third round, you have your pick of receivers, Williams or whoever the case may be. But I think the Packers had a great opportunity to nail this draft. I do not feel they did.
Yeah, I can follow that for sure. And like for my part, you may feel a little bit different. There wasn't a draft class that I hated out of all 32 groups, but there were some that were questionable, right? That's like, okay, maybe I could see why you went this way, but it doesn't seem like the way that would have helped you out the most, like right now. So one of those teams to me is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I know that they're planning for a future without Mike Evans and maybe Chris Godwin down the road, but you just re-signed Chris Godwin. You bring in two more receivers. Mika Ibuka, I like the player, but you guys needed help on defense. You needed a lot of help on defense. And you pass up on a guy like Jedi Barron, who could have helped you out a lot.
Yeah.
And he went the pick right after you. That was a mistake, in my opinion. And then I don't know. Again, I don't hate it necessarily, but I don't love it either. Back-to-back corners. After that, Benjamin Morrison, Jacob Parrish. I think you needed some more help up front and well before you went after it in the fourth round with David Walker out of Central Arkansas. And then Elijah Roberts on the defensive front. I like the player, but again, it just seemed a little bit out of order, right? Go get that stud corner in the first round. Get your wide receiver a little bit later. You don't need that right now. But you do need some help on the defensive line and along every level of the defense needed help. So it just seemed out of order. That's what I would say about that draft. And then the other one, Andrew, and I think you'll agree with me on this one. The other one that felt out of order was Carolina. I felt like, the Tet McMillan pick was a little early for Tet McMillan for me. I thought he was more like a mid first round pick. He goes at 8. That's pretty high. Again, I don't hate it, but it was like, okay, I guess you could go that route if you wanted to. Nick Scorton, Princely, Uman Mielin. I think I said that right. Maybe not. Uman Mielin. Decent players, but you didn't go get a defensive back until round 4, and it was Lathan Ransom out of Ohio State. You probably needed 2 safeties in this draft. You probably needed 2 corners in this draft. You didn't go get any of that. So, again, I don't hate it, but I have some questions about the order in which you went and got some of these players. So, and I do get it too. Like if they were trying to move back in the first round and it just didn't work out, then I guess go ahead and take that player that you were going to move back for. But why wasn't that Janae Barron? Well, why wasn't that Will Johnson? In one of those guys, maybe.
Yeah, and their front 7 needed so much help. And you get a guy like McMillan who really doesn't add anything extra to your receiver room, in my personal opinion. And you pass on guys like Jalen Walker, who you were perceived to love, and you pass on other premier pass rushers that just the draft.
Michael Williams, yeah. Michael Williams, who went right after, or a couple picks after to the 49ers. So there were guys there that I would have liked it more for the Panthers if they had the Falcons draft, where they had traded up for another edge rusher, went all in on the defense. And I get it. Work with Bryce Young, bring some guys in there. But that offense was pretty fun by the end of last year, even without a Tet McMillan and without some of these other players. So your defense was awful. It was really bad. So should have maybe addressed that a little bit sooner. All right. Let's go ahead and take a break. I know that was a long first half, but we'll make the second half a little bit more rapid fire. But we wanted to get through those favorites and least favorites here as kind of a building block for the rest of the discussion about the draft. When we come back, we are going to have more content for you here on the NFL Draft. Don't go anywhere. The Draft Dynasty Podcast. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the Draft Dynasty Podcast. Andrew Wilbar, Jeremy Betz. We're wrapping up the NFL Draft. We just talked about our favorite and least favorite draft classes. We're going to dive into some player team matches that we really, really liked. And Andrew, I'm going to start this off here with, and it's our Pittsburgh Steelers, but I have to talk about it. I have to talk about Caleb Johnson going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. This was the match made in heaven for running back to team duos in the league. Even if you're not as high on Caleb Johnson as maybe I was, whatever the case may be, if you're looking for the running back in the class that most fit with a team, I think this was the one. Caleb Johnson from Iowa going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I just had to jump on that one because you know how much I've loved talking about him. And then the fact that he lands with my team after all that process and all that consideration and not thinking he was going to be there in the third round. This was just match made in heaven. I know they pass up on a quarterback or two to get him, but for this type of marriage between player and player strengths and team strengths, couldn't be better in my opinion. Caleb Johnson, Pittsburgh Steelers is my first match team to player that I really liked.
Yeah. Great zone runner. It's going to be interesting to see what he does. I'm going to give you one right here. I didn't love this team's draft, and I don't like what they gave up to go and get him, but I think James Pierce Jr. is a really good fit for the Atlanta Falcons defense and Raheem Morris. Yeah. You look at the build and the body type of some of these guys that LA has brought in, from Terrell Lewis to, I mean, you had a little bit bigger version, Jared Verse last year. But that same guy who's got that quick get off, the great motor off the edge, and just has that finesse to be able to find a way to get home. I really like James Pierce as a player. I know there have been some character concerns about him in general, but man, if you're just looking for a guy who's got a ton of upside as a pass rusher, James Pierce Jr. has really got overlooked, I felt, in the draft process. They got to steal at pick 26 if he hits, because this guy's got a chance to be a premier pass rusher in the NFL.
Yeah, he does. I thought that was a brilliant move by them to land him. And I know it costs a lot, but when you're talking about what they needed, that this was the team in the draft that saw their biggest need and said, we're not leaving this draft without addressing it to the fullest extent that we can. And they did that. And it's fine to me. I mean, I get the throwing away another first round pick to get back up there, but I mean, if you love him, do it, commit to it. I like it. Josh Simmons to the Kansas City Chiefs, great fit for what they need, for the type of player he is. And Andrew, if it weren't for the injuries, we were talking about this guy near the top 10 of this draft as well. With those other tackles, those other prospects up there, he's athletic. He's got the skill set that you want. If he comes back healthy, fully healthy, then I think he's got a chance to be exactly what they need. And they got him with the 32nd pick in the draft. They traded back a spot with Philadelphia in a weird one pick swap there at the end of the first round, and they still land their guy that I thought that they were going to have to trade up for. Great match, great value there. I love this.
Yeah, with Simmons, he's played both tackle spots, and that's what the Chiefs wanted. That's what they needed. I'm just not knowing, bringing in a new left tackle. They've had injuries up front. We still don't know what's going to happen with Suamataia and the draft pick last year. It's just it's a risk pick, but at the same time, a safe pick for the Chiefs, knowing that he can play both spots as an extra guy who, obviously, he's a first-round pick. You're hoping he hits, but you've got to kill that position until you finally hit on it. So I think they needed to go for a swing for the fence here, and they did. I think Simmons is going to be really, really good for them if he can stay healthy. I think he's a franchise left tackle. Here's another one for you. Nick Emmanwori to the Seahawks.
Yeah.
Mike McDonald gets his Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah.
And I think that is a great landing spot for him. And if we want to stick in the NFC, how about the Detroit Lions and Tate Ratledge in the second round?
You stole mine. That's exactly where I was going to go next.
Talk about a kneecap biter.
You got me. Yeah, absolutely. That was going to be my next one. Just absolute match made in heaven for stylistic player and what this team wants. I love that one too, man. I really do. I'll go a different direction then. I'm going to go with another running back. I mean, we didn't talk about the running backs a lot after this is our first show, so maybe I should stop before I say that. We talked about them a lot before the draft, right? So let's talk about them a little bit here. How about RJ Harvey to the Broncos and what Sean Payton wants to do with this group? I think RJ Harvey, he was underrated across boards in this draft, and they took him in the second round. So the NFL didn't underrate him. They may have rated him a little bit higher than I would have, actually. So, but the fact that he was still there, the fact that he goes to Denver is a great fit for the schematics that he likes to run. Sean Payton there. I think that he's a great fit for the Broncos.
Yeah, I like that. If you want a day three guy, and I was tempted not to mention this because everyone's talking about it so much, but I think if you're talking about a fit, I think we need to mention Shedeur Sanders to the Cleveland Browns.
Sure.
I think it's a fair point. I mean, we were talking about the Browns being a fit for Shedeur in the first round potentially, and obviously it was wise they didn't take him that high. But everyone that was not a fan of Shedeur, it didn't necessarily give them, I don't think, the most valid reasons. Now, again, I wasn't in the room, so I don't know exactly how bad he rubbed them the wrong way. But sometimes you understand when a player with great talent falls, you're like, man, I don't think he should have fallen that far. I would have bet on the upside. But with Shedeur, it wasn't even character concerns necessarily. It's personality. Like, is this guy going to be a diva? Is he going to be a prime time? Like, to me, in the fourth round, you take that risk. If you cut him next year, nobody's going to give a rip. They're not. He's a fifth round pick, actually. He ends up falling to the fifth round. The risk could not be lower. Really, it couldn't. And a team that's searching for a quarterback, you've got to take that swing for the fence. And just because it's so weird how people get so turned around by what the media says. Shedeur goes in the first round, man, that he's going to be a great franchise quarterback. Every team should be considering taking him. And now that he falls to the fifth round, those same people are saying, oh, yeah, he's not going to be anything in the NFL.
Yeah.
What changed? Like,
right.
We watched the same tape. I understand that I had Shedeur Sanders lower than most people, but I still had him at 31 or 32 on the big board. I don't regret putting him that high, even though he fell into the 5th round. I don't, because he's a good football player. You watch that tape, and is going by his tape, which is all I have to go off of. I'm not in those rooms. He played very good football. It wasn't great, but it was good. And he showed enough to prove that he could be a starting level quarterback in the NFL. I compared him to Dak Prescott. I still think that's a good comparison for him. By the way, Dak Prescott went in the 4th round. So it's I don't know. I don't understand why the player changes just because the pick number may have been drastically different than what we expected. That doesn't change the player. It just changes it just shows us that the NFL didn't perceive him to be as highly as he did. But why should the NFL's opinion change mine? I'm not saying that I'm smarter than the NFL, or, I mean, the NFL has more information than I do, obviously. But I'm not going to change my perspective about the player in general just because he was drafted lower. I still think George's going to be a great guy. And I think for the Browns, you've got to be willing to take a chance on that guy.
Yeah. I honestly don't think most teams thought anything different about the talent than what you're talking about. I think they saw him as a late 1st round talent, but they didn't want the dog and pony show to go with it. And if the meetings went as badly as they did, I guarantee you, Andrew, 25 teams took him off their board. That he just wasn't on their board. I'm pretty sure the Pittsburgh Steelers took him off their board. Like there was rumor floating around on X that if Shedeur Sanders and Will Howard had both been there in the 6th, they would have still taken Will Howard over Shedeur Sanders. I just don't think he was on their board anymore. And whether that's fair or not, that's not on me to judge. I just believe that was to be the case in the end. And yeah, it's still good value. And I think it's a good fit for Cleveland. I had them trading up in the 1st round in my final mock draft to land him. They end up trading up for him in the 5th round. So where you're taking, all that does is change expectations, not change the type of player you are. Last fit for me, Andrew, and I can't decide. So I'm going to ask it as a question. I cannot decide which is a better fit for the Baltimore Ravens, Malachi Starks or Mike Green, but they're both fantastic fits. So if you had to pick one of these guys, I think I'm going to go Starks, just barely, because I think of how he complements Kyle Hamilton there, and just the fact that it was like ultimate wait for the guy to fall to you in the 1st round and take him at pick 30 or wherever you're picking. If you're the Ravens, like usual, that was just one of the way they do things moves, and Malachi Starks is great, but either one you could go with here.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that one, because that was the other one I was going to mention too. Mike Green, I think you can't go wrong with either of these picks. I get both of these picks in A. Absolutely. I love Malachi Starks. Mike Green, I know that there's some concerns about character with him, and he's got the 2 allegations against him, but Baltimore's dealt with players like this before, and they've turned them into great players. And I think that Mike Green is the next in line. You've got Away there already. I know that Ajabo has not reached his full potential. He just can't stay healthy, and that's been the big turn back on him, because based on gifts, he's an insanely athletic guy. Yep. But adding an extra pass rusher is huge in this division. You got to be able to get after the quarterback. The Steelers have T.J. Watt. The Browns have Myles Garrett. The Bengals, still currently have Trey Hendrickson. I don't think for much longer. But every team except the Ravens has that dynamic pass rusher. Away is solid, but I wouldn't put him on the same level as the other 3.
Right.
Mike Green has the chance to be on that level based on his sheer talent and what we saw from him this past year at Marshall. This guy has a chance to achieve that level.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, our final topic for the night before we get out of here. I say the night, we're recording on Thursday night, but you're listening to this on Friday probably or after. And we appreciate all the listeners. Absolutely. And thank you for sticking with us throughout the draft process. Let's get to our final topic, Andrew. Who improved themselves the most? And I was kind of thinking about this from a tier perspective. So who from like the playoff team tier leap themselves into Super Bowl contender, or who from the non-playoff groups jump themselves into the playoff conversation after their draft? Does anybody stand out to you in that type of arena?
I'm going to take a different track here than expected. I'm going to say the Kansas City Chiefs went from Super Bowl contender to Super Bowl favorite again.
Okay.
with this one, with Josh Simmons securing that offensive line, which they had to do. I don't love the Norman Lott pick at the end of the second or the Gelati pick at the beginning of the third, but they are schematic fits for them, what they do up front.
Right.
Noel Williams is a great ball. He's a ball hawk at corner. I liked that pick a lot. Jalen Royals was a steal in the round 4. And if we're talking about just perfect fits like we were talking about earlier, how about Brashard Smith in the 7th round to the Kansas City Chiefs? You want to talk about another Isaiah Pacheco potentially on the line? How about Brashard Smith, a guy who's a great pass catcher, an explosive runner out of the backfield? He's a great fit for Andy Reid's offense. He's going to get some snaps this year, I think.
I like that one a lot. I think that that's very fair, especially when you think about too that the Chiefs wanted that three-peat bad. They're going to be mad this year. They're going to run roughshod through the regular season just to get back to the playoffs again and see what happens. So I'm going to go. I already talked about New England. I think that they're like my easiest making the leap candidate to the playoffs from the doldrums. The worst to first candidate that I would go with here. But the other team for me, you know me, Andrew, from last year's draft class, we were talking about my favorite quarterback was Drake May in the class, just because he had the size, I thought, to be a prototype quarterback in today's NFL, but still had a lot of the upside of like a Caleb Williams or a Jaden Daniels did as a passer. But my next guy was Caleb Williams. I've been a Caleb Williams fan as far as the player goes on the field, what he brings to the table. I think that the Bears under Ben Johnson with this draft class in place, Luther Burden, one of your favorite players, goes to the Bears in the 2nd round. That was a great pick. I like the Colson Loveland pick a lot because of the fit there, and he can kind of be there. I'm going to blank on his name now, the Lions tight end that they drafted a couple years ago.
Sam Laporta.
Yeah, Sam Laporta. He can be that type of guy for them. They added some defensive players. They added some offensive line guys too. It was just a good draft from them, and they jumped themselves up to me into with their offseason and this draft into another tier of from scrappy to I think that they would be a playoff favorite if in the betting market at this point, if I were to make a bet on something like that. So I didn't love every pick in their draft. Ruben Hippolyte, I mean, what are we doing here in the 4th round? You could have gotten him much later. But I like Zoff Frazier. I like Shamar Turner. Ozzie Trapillo from Boston College, a little early for him too. But I don't know. When you combine the high-end players that they got with the coaching staff and the rest of the moves they made this offseason, this team rocket ships up, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like with the Hippolyte selection, they did it maybe just not for namesake. I'm like, hey, I'm a Hippolyte. Are you a Hippolyte? And just like, we're gonna have this Hippolyte posse, and they're gonna have this own section, where all the Hippolytes are gonna go sit.
Right. His jersey ought to sell like hotcakes off the rack. I mean,
I would think so, man. I tell you what, based on player, I didn't see much on tape, but hey, whatever the case may be, I agree with a lot of what you said there. I'm going to give you another team. This is the other team that I had in mind. The Seattle Seahawks, I think, are back into being division contenders and potentially contenders to win a playoff game. And I know that's crossing your fingers with Sam Darnold is your quarterback. Right. But you talk about securing that interior of that offensive line. You've got Charles Cross to tackle. You got some other guys on the offensive line, but you needed to address the middle. Gray Zabel's a good fit for them. I think he can step in immediately, even though he's transitioning to more of an interior position long term. I think he's going to be good for the Seahawks. You talk about some of the guys they got even in the middle rounds. We already talked about the Emenwari selection. But as you go down this, Elijah Arroyo, you want to talk about a guy who's very similar to a type of guy like Noah Fant, almost Noah Fant, David Njoku type receiver. Elijah Arroyo is that type of guy. I think he's going to be a good fit there with what they want to do. We know Mike McDonald likes the tight end. Jalen Milroe. If for some reason Darnold struggles or gets hurt, I'm telling you what, watch out. Jalen Milroe could surprise some people with his running ability. We talked about Riley Mills. Love him. Torrey Horton. Talk about sleeper receiver, a guy who's had a bunch of production in years past. It's just this past year he didn't as much. I believe he was injured for a good little bit. And Damian Martinez, he's a Seahawks running back. He is flat out a Seahawks running back. That power guy in the mold of a Marshawn Lynch, of a Kenneth Walker, to all the guys that they've got already. He's just one of those guys, next man up. We can bring that guy in. I think he's going to get some snaps this year too if they have some injuries at the running back position. So the Seahawks are a team, I think they bolster their depth in enough areas to where they can be more than just on that mediocrity level in the NFC West. I think they have a chance to not only win the division, but to compete in that first round of the playoffs.
I like it a lot. Last team I'll mention here, and then we'll wrap this one up. But I know I just said that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to run roughshod through the league because they're upset and get back to the playoffs. I'm going to walk that back a little bit because there's a team in their division that I really like, and it's the Chargers. Andrew, listen to these 3 picks here, or 4 picks in a row. And let's not necessarily talk about like value, where they were selected, but think about the players and what they will do for the Chargers this year, and how they will help them improve. Amarian Hampton in the first round, running back out of North Carolina. Wide receiver Trey Harris out of Ole Miss, big body receiver, pairs really well with McConkey there. Jamari Caldwell helped them plug the middle of that run defense, kind of be their replacement for, oh man, this one's going to kill me too. They had a guy in the middle of the field, Puna Ford, that they had in the middle of the defense last year, to plug the run. And then a guy you and I were very high on, especially you, who went much later than later than we thought he could have gone at points throughout this process. Kyle Kennard, the edge rusher out of South Carolina, to replace Joey Bosa, maybe alongside Khalil Mack. That's a feisty front defense there. And then you've got Hampton and Trey Harris to help out the offense under Jim Harbaugh. That looks pretty scary to me. I think that they've improved themselves, and they might give the Chiefs a run for their money this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm never a proponent of going running back first round, but I understand the philosophy in a draft like this. And Trey Harris is a great schematic fit for him, like you said. And they found some values on day 3 that I think they're going to compete for roster spots. They're very much Harbaugh guys. This was a Jim Harbaugh draft. Like him, dislike him, he's gonna, if he knows how to find the guys to fit his system, whether anybody else likes those guys or not. So from that perspective, I think they were confident in the selections they made, and they're happy with the direction the team is going. They already overachieved last year, and I think both you and I expected that to happen. Most of the national media was not on board with that. I think this year they're in position again, maybe take another leap forward and be a true contender. Maybe not. To me, I wouldn't say they're contending with the Chiefs for the division. I think the Chiefs are still on another level. But if you're talking about winning a playoff game, getting that divisional round, and who knows, maybe they're on to a collision with the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game if they can get far enough. I know it's a tough road ahead, but I don't think it's out of the realm of comprehension.
If you had to pick the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Los Angeles Chargers to go further in 2025, who would you take?
Chargers.
At this point. Chargers. I would agree. I don't like it, but I would agree. All righty. Andrew, lots of fun. Longer show again, but hey, we had to wrap this draft up in the only way we know how, which is diving deep. Lots of content. We wanted to get you guys as much as we could about the draft class overall before we dive into some more specifics. And Andrew, I know you're going to be traveling this summer a lot, so you may be in and out of the show throughout the summer. We're going to have some guests coming in to help keep this thing rolling along with the Steelers Fix, but you've got a lot of content still coming out before you head out for your summer stuff. So tell us a little bit about what's coming up for you before that happens.
We've got the Way Too Early 2026 mock, which hopefully before we end up leaving, we can maybe discuss that on a show. And then we have our all draft teams coming up too. And I'll put that into an article as well. So make sure you go and check those 2 things out. And I know that you will enjoy them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to dive into some dynasty stuff here on the show here very soon for you guys too. It's going to be a lot of fun. So stay tuned to the DDP. Stay tuned to the Fans First Sports Network and the Steel Curtain Network, whatever your team affiliate is. Stay tuned to all of that. We've got you covered for the rest of the doldrums of the offseason coming up. Schedule releases next, and then after that, it kind of all goes right down the drain until training camps. We'll see you then and all the way through the process. So stay tuned. We'll talk to you next time here on the Draft Dynasty Podcast. Keep drafting, everybody.